Before starting the session, I would like to give a disclaimer. You must have seen the disclaimer in the beginning of uh, television serials. Now we call like internet uh, teleseries or films. So how this disclaimer reads like, there is generally disclaimer happens to be like this program or this film or this teleseries is not related to any live or real life character. Any comparison of the real life incidents or character is coincidental. Many of those, most of these uh, films and teleseries give this kind of disclaimer. I want to give also a kind of a disclaimer, but almost opposite to what is given in in these series. And the opposite of that is that whatever we are going to discuss will be related to the real life incidents. Any comparison with the real life incidents or characters are, they say non-intentional, we say it is intentional. And it has everything to do with our real job, real life, and real characters of our life. That's one. That's the first disclaimer. Another disclaimer is that I'm not here sitting to assuming that you know your job. I know your job better than you know your job. So you all are teaching in your fields, and you are master in those fields. I'm not sitting here and giving you expert advice about what you can do and what you can pick up, what you cannot pick up, or not to pick up. In fact, what I'm going to share is something based on my experience, how I reflect over things, and how I have understood the whole enterprise and the endeavor of research. So from that perspective, I am going to share something that has a zero value. And we know that no matter how many zeros we put up on the paper, that has no value. Until some number is added, some number is written in front of those zeros. Only when a number is written in front of the zeros, the value of the zeros is realized. In the same way, you need, whatever I'm going to share and tell you has no value, zero value, until you put your number, until you put your reference, your reflection, your experience, your ideas in front of those zeros. Then only it may create some value for yourself and for the group. So with these two disclaimers, I would like to share a few thoughts about research process in this field. I wish to share a PPT, and I'm going to share. I'm sharing it now. I hope the slide is visible.
Yes, sir, visible.
Yeah. We every year conduct a faculty development program for the management in the field of management and social sciences on research methods and approaches. Last year, when we had to shift online mode, we did a survey to understand what are the expectations from the prospective participants about research method program. And when we clubbed those, when we looked at the overlap and identified which are the topmost expectations from a research method related program, what we found were these 10 things. Advanced research approaches, we found that people are interested in understanding and equipping themselves to publish in some reputed journals. We expect some focus on the innovative strategies and methods for the research, guidance for writing journal articles qualitative research approaches as well as has been the area of interest. So if we look at the general trend, what we see is that whenever we talk about research method, we think that the discussion will be around techniques, and discussion can be around certain tests. What is statistical test? Which is statistical test to be applied? Which method to be employed? Which softwares to be used? And sometimes we also expect something about the publication tips. What are the uh, tips for cracking, or what are to be able to get acceptance from the good journals? What are the ethics, plagiarism related things related to publications? But if I reflect on my experience and look at some of the very successful researchers around me, what I find is that these are the secondary questions. The technique, test, software, tips are the secondary questions. What seems to be at the core of good research strategy and good research plan and good research output are some of these things. And first and foremost, in my understanding, is interesting research question. What are you looking for? Are you looking for something interesting? Do you have something to tell to the world which will be interesting for some of them? Who bothers about our research? Why that gap has to be fulfilled? Many a time we assume that if this kind of study is not done, we say, okay, this is the research gap and I have found the research gap. That is not good enough logic. Means filling up the research gap may not be required. That gap may not be worth filling up. So interesting question is the starting point of any research work. And we need to take effort. It's a matter of conscious effort to identify interesting research question. It is not something which is serendipity or someone can give, or something which is there in the research gap, so I am going to do that. That is not the research. That may not be interesting research question. So we need to consciously make effort to identify the research question, and that requires our engagement, active engagement in the field as well. As long as we are talking about the practical aspects of social sciences like management or entrepreneurship, interesting research questions are all around us. But many a time, many of us struggle for identifying interesting question, because though we live social life, but when it comes to our research, we do not engage with the society, and we do not engage with the whole lot of social reality around us, which is constantly throwing some or other interesting questions. So that's the first thing. Second thing is original thinking is required. New typologies, new methods, new concepts can always be developed, and that's the fun part of the social science research. But what we look around, uh, most of the researchers in India, they look at the already existing constructs. They do not even try, most of us do not even try to develop new concepts and new constructs. And we keep using the constructs which are developed in the Western society. I don't have any problem with Western world and the knowledge they have created that has been immensely useful. A lot of that is useful for them, and a considerable part might be useful, it has been useful for our society as well. At the same time, we must realize that reality is socially constructed. Different cultures have different worldviews. Not saying that one kind of worldview is better than other. We need to understand the difference in the worldview, difference in the social reality. And in light of that, if we can think and critique the existing ideas, or in light of that, if we critique the existing construct, I think that is the beginning of our research work. So original thinking is extremely important for uh, for our uh, for our research. Next is seeking insight, means what to look out, what are the unanswered questions, what are the interesting things happening, and can we know something about how to conduct certain activity. Insights about leadership, insights about organization culture, insights about how moments are created, insights about how a social reality takes shape, maybe in the field of business, maybe in the field of sustainable development. We need to constantly look out for the insights, and that insight may result into interesting research. Critical thinking is again a very important aspect. We consider existing thinking, we take existing thinking for granted. We grant in the sense that we consider that existing thinking and existing models and theories are sufficient. That may not be the case. We should be ready to look at the different aspects of our work. We need to look at the we need to be ready to look at our reality with the with original perspective, and we need to be critical about whatever are the existing theoretical frameworks. Conversation with these scholars is also very important. What we can learn by reading so many books many times can be understood and can be learned with few conversations. So the conversation with the scholar is extremely important aspect of any of a research journey. So it is important to find out who are the people in our field, who all are the thinkers in this field, getting hold of them, getting to know about their work, and having conversation not without knowing their work, but conversation after getting ourselves familiar to their work and having exchange of ideas. That is very fruitful area for research work. uh, Last but not the least is collaboration. uh, most of us are full-time participants, most of us are full-time teachers, and we all have some limitation in terms of uh, uh, a requirement of balancing our teaching, research, and administrative duties. So collaboration is extremely important, but collaboration is an art in itself. We need to identify we need to develop the ability to work with our colleagues, work with the PhD scholars. For example, with the PhD scholars, we may uh, for example, the PhD scholars are not like a given resource. They also have the independent thinking process. They also uh, need to be developed as independent thinking scholars. So research scholars cannot be just given the problem, readily available problem, and just can be the given the simple instruction for doing research. So we, with them as well, we need to develop the art of collaboration. With our colleague, we have to certainly develop the art of collaboration, getting to know each other's research interests, working for the working out a plan, developing a plan, working out a plan, and then being professional in terms of our contribution, taking a fair share of the responsibility. These are extremely important things for for a successful, effective research process. How we can do that, before we dwell on these thoughts, if you have any observations and comments on these things. Whatever we have what I have just shared, if you have any thoughts about, or if you have any comment about this, so far it's making sense. Well, I'm assuming that, yeah.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Indrila. I just wanted to know, as research scholar, sometimes, you know, critical thinking and original thinking. We think it is original, but whatever we think is already been thought of. Someone on the other, somewhere in some part of the world, has already thought of it or has done some work on it. So ultimately, we end up doing it, doing something very similar, but we change the context or we change here and there. That is what I have experienced personally.
Yeah.
Many times I think something and I feel, oh, this is so original and it's so unique and nice. But when I go and search on Google, and then there is plethora of thought process which is already there. Someone or the other has already thought of it. कुछ तो करके रखा है. So what do you do in that circumstance? I mean, how much original thinking is actually happening in research? That is one of my most critical questions which comes to my mind. And there's so much of knowledge body there is already existing. So another PhD, another scholarly work, another research work. What value actually is it creating? Is a question which hounds me again and again. I'm a PhD scholar myself, and I'm pursuing PhD, and that is what I feel, sir. That already इतना सब कर लिया है. कौन पढ़ रहा है, कौन किसका थीसिस कौन पढ़ रहा है? इतने सारे थीसिस शोध गंगा में पड़ा हुआ है, वो यूनिवर्सिटी में, ये यूनिवर्सिटी में. मुझे तो ये समझ में नहीं आता है सर कि हम सिंगल पीएचडी करते क्यों है? Why can't we collaborate in PhD? Or why the PhD has to be only done by one person? Because person cannot be an expert in everything. So how is this knowledge body helping the world in any way? I'm sure it is helping. I'm not saying it's not helping, but most of it is just a PhD done.
Okay. So thanks for pointing out the elephant in the room. So I will take these your observations and questions one by one. The first thing is, why the hell PhD should be a collaborate? Why should be the individual process, cannot be the collaborative process? The PhD degree, as long as it is a form of a degree, it will be individual process. The degree cannot be given to the group of the people uh, uh, because of the complexity of the matter. So that's the first thing. It's a degree, and as long as it is a degree, individual person will be awarded with that. Can PhD is PhD really a solo journey? I don't think so. PhD, in the PhD process, I'm sure you also must be getting help of your guide, of your collaborators, of your friends, of your fellow PhD scholars. Aren't you getting the help of all of them? And aren't they helping you to shape up your ideas?
Not sure, sir. वही मैं बोल रही हूँ
So
कि it is.
if they are not helping, then find other friends and find other scholars. And I think good that you have come to this program. Find someone whom you can talk about your work in this group.
Yes, sir.
What is your field of
Sir,
inquiry?
I am not from social entrepreneurship. Or
I am also not. Means
okay, I teach business of fashion. I have done my NIFT, and I'm pursuing my PhD in fashion business. So while doing before I did the PhD, I thought it was something very very, what you call, I had some romantic ideas about PhD, but but while
Fascinating.
doing this process, I just realized there are so many stumbling blocks, and I feel in India probably this is the scenario where it is like there are some tick marks. इतने सारे conference कर दो, इतने सारे papers लिख दो, ये कर दो, वो कर दो, PhD बना लो, thesis कर दो, tweak it this way, tweak it that way, finish your PhD in 4 years. I mean, can somebody learn knowledge in 4 years in a time period, time bound thing, and that to one person,
Yes.
and give a very, very productive work? I
Yes.
doubt. I have seen so many theses out there. I don't think they're adding any value to anyone. It is just
Oh,
a work done. I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry to be so critical about this, but this is something angst which is coming from inside me. That why is the universities, why are the people thinking out there not thinking in this way, that while we have the Nobel laureates who do research work, 2-3 people together sit together and do a work, and they present and they are doing something which is useful to the world. Here
yeah.
we have our minds, we have, there are a lot of thinking people here, but it is
I
humanly
think
sometimes
yes.
impossible to do a very.
I really appreciate, and I can probably empathize with your angst. But
I'm very sorry, sir.
no, 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 yes, don't feel sorry about it. We can actually examine your observations, or you can say your discomfort about the whole enterprise of the PhD process. So, as I told you, this is an individual degree, so individual have to submit. More importantly, it is for most of the people, it is the first systematic training in the scientific process. And scientific process means hypothesis driven thinking, um, uh, being critical about whatever is given, doing collecting data, analyzing it properly, drawing inferences. So there's a whole scientific thinking process which is supposed to be taught during the PhD program. Now, if that is the case, we have to understand that uh, it's a matter of training. And when the training is done, when training is going on, we need to check whether training has happened or not. So that's why the collaborative PhD idea is not something which have worked. But at the same time, uh, what the kind of PhD work I am seeing in my institute, means at MDI or IIT Bombay, we see a lot, all the PhD scholars are being benefited by so many other senior scholars and their colleagues. This one statement of Michael Polanyi very beautifully captures this thought that research is individual journey with universal intent. So though it's an individual journey, but we intend to develop something which is universal in nature. And even our, you can say, the authors or the other researchers whom we quote, they are also part of that community. We are learning from that and them as well. Some of the scholars are extremely helpful to shape up our thoughts. So, and in the current time, we can actually email to them and can interact. If you see my thesis, or I'm sure many of you must be having similar experience, we write the acknowledgement, and when we write in the acknowledgement section, we genuinely acknowledge some of the scholars who would have influenced our ideas, who would have supported to develop in development of our ideas, and who would also have shaped our ideas. So though it's an individual journey, but with the universal intent, and that is the design of the PhD program. That's my response to the second question. That question, is it really valuable? I share your concern that uh, in India, 30,000 PhDs are submitted, or 25,000 certainly submitted every year, and we probably do not have 25,000 problems. Means had one PhD would have solved one problem, we wouldn't have any problem in India. But we see that is not happening. Means problems are mounting along with the PhDs. The theses are mounting on another hand.
True, sir.
So that is the process. Not that no thesis has any solution. It is not like that. A lot of PhDs have given great ideas. A lot of good research actually comes through some or other PhD work. A lot of Nobel laureates actually worked. Uh, they later on were given this recognition, but the foundation of their work was laid during their PhD program. So, if you look at the Indian scholars, Indian Nobel laureates, take example of Professor Amartya Sen. His thesis has this element of developmental economics, on which he continued to work and then recognized worldwide. You can take Dr. Raman. Dr. Raman's work Dr. Raman's work, C.V. Raman's work was anyway path breaking in the field of optics and other branches of and that branch of physics. C.N.R. Rao, the Bharat Ratna. Professor C.N.R. Rao was awarded Bharat Ratna, is professor in ISC Bangalore. He has been advisor to Prime Minister, scientific advisor to the Prime Minister. He's an institution builder. His thesis was greatly appreciated by Dr. C.V. Raman, and he continued to work in that field. And so there are so many examples. I worked on the spiritual climate, and then I continued to work in that field for next 5-7 years. And some body of knowledge was created, and some organizations are using, some researchers are finding it useful, etc. Many of our students are working who are actually help in operations, for example. In operations management, many of our students are working on some algorithms, on some processes which are used by organizations, and in that process they are saving lots and lots of money and achieving the economy of scale much earlier. Branding, I can give you examples, and a complete whole lecture can be completed in just giving examples how research and PhD, which were started in the PhD, have been useful for the society and industry in many ways. Okay, so so that's thing that though all PhDs are not giving the equally powerful insights, number one, I need to acknowledge that. We also need to acknowledge that for knowledge to be useful to society, you need an institutional mechanism. You also need an administrative structure for that. Industry academic partnership is that whole field which includes some level, a different kind of institutional maturity and administrative structure. That has to be developed. And that's why if you look at the national education policy, at many places, at least in the policy document, it is recognized that industry partnership with the practicing world is immensely emphasized in the new education policy. Not that before this policy, people were not aware of that. People were aware of that. But I hope that after this policy, we develop some institutions and structure. I'm reminded of my first visit to USA. For the longer duration, that was of a longer duration, about a month or so. Visited about 3-4 major universities there, starting from Harvard. One strange thing I see there in the American university, and looking at that, I almost fell into depression, assuming that probably India can never reach, we can never match. But then there are some lot of positives as well, and I'm with my own limitation, I'm working towards that objective. If you roam around in the American university, I saw that a medical college is there. After a few furlongs of medical college, you see a medical device company is there. After a few meters, you see a medical, a management institution, management college or management school is there. And on the similar campus, there are social science, psychology, sociology related departments are there. On the same vicinity, you have incubation centers, offices of the think tanks also working, and you don't know that where the so-called industry or the functional organizations and where the university and university departments and they are pretty merged in terms of the physical structure as well as identity. So you regularly see students from the management institutions going to the medical college sometime for the internship, and sometime medical students coming to the social sciences to understand the ethnography to carry out the public health related kind of work. So looking at that, I was amazed, since this was the first visit about 10 years ago. And also I felt sad, because can we have that kind of, how much time we need to dedicate to the country, dedicate to create this kind of ecosystem in our country. But then I got associated with some other organizations who have the similar dream that looks very impossible. But what is the fun if you look at very feasible dreams? Then there's no fun in those dreams. They are, in the very beginning, they are very feasible. If they are impractical, looking infeasible, then only they are exciting. So working on with some of those organizations, one of them is Research for Resurgence, which Mukul Kanitkarji, you have already interacted with him. So they have this similar kind of vision to create this kind of ecosystem in India. So doing my bit and with that huge organization. So my invitation is that as an academic, whatever problems, whatever challenges, whatever complaints you have about the PhD process, you become the solution for that. So if you think that PhD do not solve problem, which I have explained that is not always the case, a lot of good PhDs, a lot of great work of great scholars actually started with their PhD. But if you think it is not useful, you make it useful. If you think it is not being used in the society, think about where you can make friends, where you can build a collaboration, who are the scholars with whom you would like to have the conversation to make your knowledge matter to the industry. Try to look at who are the people and who are the industry partners who can give some insights and who are willing to use your knowledge. So it's not that it is not happening, but you have to decide that you have to make it happen.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I think I'll do a PhD on PhD now.
Do an exemplary PhD. Do a PhD which addresses all the problems which you have pointed out.
Yes, sir. That's what I said. PhD on PhD. How PhD can be changed, at least in India, with context to India, how PhD should change, because we are talking about collaboration and critical thinking and communication and 21st century skills. So I think we can collaborate on PhD also. Why make unnecessary body of things? I'm not telling about the ultra intelligent and the people. I'm not saying that all the PhD is not valuable. Of course there are valuable, and there are many big institutes which are, because I feel, sir, research is of course very important, but when research comes with a timeline and a sword hanging on your head.
Okay, so let me I think there is one more question being asked by some other participants, so we can take that question. But as far as timeline is concerned, there also I am in favor of keeping a timeline, because there is no problem which is end in itself. All problems can be looked at much bigger scale, and they can be scaled down as well. So there's a process and a skill called scoping. Scoping is part of any project. You go to any project in the world, scoping is part of that. So I can say with some confidence, not that I'm kind of bragging about the things, but and very genuinely, because I was kind of blessed with some of the great mentors and teachers. It took about 2.5 years for me to complete a PhD, which had like 5 international publications, 3 best paper awards, and based on that, I got a job in IIT Bombay. So, and I was not an extraordinary student, by the way. I was coming from a very simple, not so well-known university. Got the seat at an MDI, and then things happened. So a lot of credit goes to my guide and the system in which I was system of which I was part of. The chairman of the PhD program and the other professors, with their blessings and with their support, with their very active support, this happened. And I was not the only person. Another person, I can give example, he's currently faculty member in IIM Ranchi. He wrote a review paper based on his coursework. So it was a coursework assignment to write a review paper. He used the appropriate framework, did a thorough work. His paper was published during the PhD itself, and then he published half a dozen other papers. His name is Dr. Amit Sachan. His first paper on the literature review, it was published in the journal in Emerald. This journal was under publication since last 24 years. It was online. In the history of 24 years of existence of that journal, this paper written by a young scholar, which was based on his first assignment, became the most downloaded paper of the journal in its existence, in a journal in its whole history. So things can happen.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sir, can I ask one question, sir?
Yes, yes.
Good afternoon, sir. She said, it's always good to hear about you. Like in the morning also, sir, you have given lots of good input, sir. Sir, as in the last slide, you mentioned the source of research begins with asking an interesting research question, sir.
Yes.
And all these points are very, very valid. In fact, like in this FDP session, and in fact, sir, were you part of this digital conference also, sir?
TISS conference?
Yeah, TISS conference.
I have been there for a couple of times, but I don't know exactly which event you are talking about.
This year you were there, no, sir? Because I've seen you over there, sir, also.
Okay.
Sir, like all these points are very valid, like collaboration, conversation with scholars, critical thinking. I feel this is a right way to go about. As Indrila ma'am was saying, PhD is only a beginning of research. Actually, like we start all the speakers that we have heard, they always say that from PhD we start liking research and we start developing interest in this field actually. So it's only the beginning actually.
Yeah, but it's a very significant beginning. And I'm not saying that PhD is just a training and a license to carry on more significant research later on. I'm not saying that. My submission is that never in your lifetime you will get such resources and undistracted attention, undistracted time to carry out your research work as much you get during the PhD program. So please don't undervalue it and try to create. So plan for greatness means that's a that's a statement. Don't plan for mediocrity. Plan for greatness. Think about revolution.
Right, sir.
Not just something like mediocre. Anyway, world will prove you mediocre in due course, but for yourself, have great plans and work on that. Then let's see, whatever happens.
Right, sir. Sir, related to the topic of like the theme of this session, training capacity building of SC promoters. Can you give us an example, like in MDI and in IIT Bombay, how does you go about promoting social entrepreneurship among the students?
So I really don't know the capacity building of the promoters, how come that thing has come up. basically this session is for the research and how to go about the research in the field of SE.
Okay, right, sir. Right, sir. Okay.
Pranjal, sir, is it okay? Okay. So this is actually about the research. I don't know from where this capacity building thing has come.
Sir, I think it was in the first draft actually. So I'm just having that draft actually. Right,
Okay.
sir.
One participant raised hand, so I can wait to take her or his question before moving on to the next slide. Okay. So I need to point out some of the general limitations of social science research in India, and which is based on certain assumptions. What are those assumptions? And I will be presenting some of the, in a way, modifications of those assumptions. So our first assumption is that research starts and remains rooted in literature review, and finding gap in literature is the ticket to the research journey. That's a basic assumption we work. However, I would like to point out there is a significant scope to revise this assumption, and we can actually say that research must be informed of the literature but may not be immersed or emerge from it. Research is in service to society and not other way around. So research question can come and actually should come from the societal realities. We can look at some of the questions, we can look at some of the unanswered questions, we can look at the social phenomena and identify some unanswered questions, then look at the literature, whether literature has some interpretation, some explanation for that issue or answer to that issue. If it is not there, we need to try out our things, we need to develop new concept, we need to develop new proposition, new hypothesis, and work around it. Second is research is objective process and generalizability is desired quality of good research. Hypothetical-deductive research process is suitable to this purpose, hence in nature objectivity is quantitative. This is the basic assumption again we hold. However, I would like to submit that the very presence of the observer changes the phenomena, and generalizability might be the hallmark for the basic sciences, but in technology, engineering, social sciences, that includes management, I think generalizability is not a great realizable objective. Recognizing the boundaries and recognizing the relevance of the research, the boundary of the relevance of any research finding is, I think, more important in social sciences than proving it to be generalizable. So a lot of social entrepreneurship, you must have noticed that in the typology of Professor Madhukar Shukla, some of the social entrepreneur will always be localized. It will be a local phenomenon. It may not happen elsewhere. A lot of things happen in India which cannot happen elsewhere. So we need to recognize the local focus, and we need to recognize the context embeddedness of any phenomenon. So we need to have, so we are actually talking about two things, context sensitivity and context embeddedness. We need to be always context sensitive, and context, the knowledge arising out of context sensitive observations may be generalizable in the different context, in other context, but context embeddedness makes us more relevant for a particular locality, and that is also fine. I say that, okay, whenever I'm doing a research, if someone says that, okay, this might be interesting for Indians, or this might be applicable in India, but may not be applicable in other parts of the world, I'm very happy with that. Means when you are talking about India, you are talking about 20% of the population of the world. So if your work has some relevance to the 15%, 20% of the population of the world, then what's the problem? Go ahead, do it, communicate that, influence the policy makers, communicate this research finding to any forum wherever possible, write research paper as well as write this write-ups in the social media or newspapers to propagate that idea. Another assumption we hold is that scientific knowledge comprises impersonal facts and science is value free. Disinterested theories are the outcome of science that again may be relevant for some branches of social sciences or the natural sciences, but may not be in the social sciences, because scientific discourse is the interaction between nature, man, communities, societies, and nations. And if that is so, we need to acknowledge how my work is being informed by the social realities, how my work is being informed by cultural reality, how it might be different. If my culture, if Indian culture has certain characteristic, and if that is different, we need to recognize that, and we need not to have so much emphasis on using the global scale, global methods, and generating the knowledge which has global relevance. Social sciences can never be global in terms of there will always be the context sensitivity involved. There will always be a nuanced interpretation of the phenomena in different cultures. So we need to be ready for that, and we need to factor into it, and we can dwell deeper into it. And that is the great source of new knowledge development. As someone was saying that how to develop new knowledge, if we are totally dependent on literature, and that too electronic data-based literature, ABSCO, Emerald, ProQuest, if we think that is the only knowledge, then we can never find it. Then it will be very difficult to find a new propositions. And then we will end up assuming that what is there to be developed. But if we come out of this, the clutches of the electronic database of ABSCO, Emerald, and ProQuest, and go to the field, talk to practicing managers, practitioners, look at the societal reality, interact with the social actors, then you will very quickly look at the limitation of the existing frameworks and theories. And that can be the moment we can endeavor towards developing new theory, or developing new insights, or developing new ideas. So these are the three basic assumptions and the refutations. If anyone has any observation, comment, or suggestion, or frustration about these, you are most welcome to share.
Sir, all of these suggestions are very valid. In fact, sir, you have rightly pointed out, generally what happens is we remain stuck up with the existing literature, and when it comes to social sciences, it's always better to go to the field, as like most of the speakers have said, sir.
And you know what happens, many times we do not endeavor into developing new concepts and theories because number one, we are not able to see what is beyond this. So for that, we need to have a critical thinking, and that critical thinking can be developed by some training in philosophy. If you have some training in philosophy, and which I strongly believe must be part of the doctoral training, we can look at how we can understand the phenomena. Phenomena is always observable, verifiable. So if we take example, so let us look at different approaches, and then we look at how to identify the new concepts, how to identify the new concepts. That is also important. I'm not ending the session by saying that okay, identify the more new ideas, but we will look at how to develop the new ideas. Okay, so Um, if anyone else having any thought about these propositions and their corrections. Okay, so I'm assuming that everybody has understood or people have fallen asleep.
Sir, related to research related to social entrepreneurship field. So, like since it's a multidisciplinary field, and as you rightly pointed out, when you have gone to the US, based on your experience, now they have a culture whereby they have integrated, like all of, the universities are regularly collaborating with the industry, and it's vice versa. Like industry is getting the inputs from the academia.
Yeah.
So they have a very strong ecosystem over there, and
yeah.
that is being reflected in the kind of research they are doing. So, sir, in the case of social entrepreneurship field, it's a multidisciplinary field, and generally we are restricted to our own domain, whatever field we are working. Like if somebody is in management, somebody is in engineering, somebody is in social sciences, they don't interact much. So, based on your experience, sir, how do you feel this multidisciplinary approach can be brought to this research field, sir?
About the field, we cannot take any guarantee, but many of you are faculty members. Many of you have research scholars working with you. Many of you uh, have a responsible position where you can influence your department, you can influence your institution. Many of you might be directors or the deans of your institution. So my humble submission is that whenever the system develops, you keep giving feedback to the system and then to the governance and the regulators, and whenever it happens, it happens. We need to start at our individual levels. Means we need to start at department level. We need to start in our individual researchers as an individual researcher capacity. And at least we can prepare our PhD students to think in terms of to have the collaboration with the multidisciplinary approach, to have respect for the different approaches, to have respect for different fields of inquiry, to inform about your research. At least that much can be done. When large number of people keep doing it, that becomes the culture of the institution. And then some of you will get the bigger responsibility. Some of you may get responsibility of designing a PhD program in your institute. Some of you will get the responsibility of building the line of research on the SE or any of the field. You bring those values to in those endeavors, and there you will see the change. Means if change has to happen, we cannot wait for the whole system to change. We are the system, and that's a democracy. That is the meaning of democracy. I have to take responsibility. I have to become the kind of exemplar. With all limitations, we have to keep doing our work. And we really don't know whom we can inspire. So how we can go about a little more original work? It is useful to start with descriptive and exploratory research. Going to the field, talking to people, understanding how the mechanism is working, what is the value chain. For the descriptive research, also there are interesting framework. For example, value chain analysis. You have also had a session on the social value creation. So now you can combine these. Many of you are the management teachers and must be familiar to the value chain analysis. Now you combine the value chain analysis with the social value creation. And that though it will be a descriptive research, it will be an explorative research, but there you will understand how the dynamics of the social entrepreneurship plays out in the market, how it influences the different institutions. Market is one institution, society is another institution, community is another institution, regulation, the governance is another institution. So how the interaction happens, that can be one way of doing the exploratory research, descriptive research. We can also look at, depending on if I am more from the psychology stream and looking at, and the leadership has been my area of interest, then I may look at what are the peculiar thing about the social entrepreneurial leadership, how it is different from a typical corporatized business-oriented leadership, or economic value, economic returns versus social returns. What is the different? What are the different strategies? How the HR processes or organizational design or systems uh, work differently for creating social values and for creating economic values. These are interesting research questions, but primarily at the exploratory and descriptive level. But we need to spend time and energy in doing the descriptive and exploratory research. Based on those, we may develop new propositions. What happens? We want to start our research with the proposition and hypothesis. Then naturally we have to be dependent on the literature, which is primarily developed in the Western society. So there is a dispersion model of the knowledge creation is working in the field of management and in general as well. It's a dispersion model because there is a center, there is a point which is considered to be the center of knowledge creation, and currently it is the North America and the Europe, which is considered to be the center, more so even North America and less even of Europe. The knowledge which is created on that center is considered to be the most valid knowledge, and that is considered to be the global knowledge. And on the periphery, something happening. So we are at the periphery, and many of the countries are at the periphery. If something is developed on the peripheries, is not considered valid until it is vetted by the so-called center, which is currently in the North America and Europe. So people at the periphery also do not quote each other until it is validated by the center. And that's what we see. Indians do not quote and do not try to understand the research work of the fellow Indians. And they always look at, okay, is there something developed in the Western scholarship or not? Because periphery to periphery conversation is not there, and the validity is not there, and recognition is also not there. So until something is validated, even if something is developed on the periphery, until vetted and validated by the center, points in the other periphery are not, they do not value that, they do not give importance to it. So it is important to engage into descriptive and exploratory research before plunging into the hypothetical deductive research. Then comes induction research. Induction means not starting with a clear hypothesis, but starting with research question. So Uma Sharma ji has raised hand. I'll just mention one more thing, and then you may please ask the question. Third is action research. Action research is a systematic, it is more than systematic problem solving. Thinking, research-based thinking when drive the solutions of the problem, that process is called action research. Now, you can read about it. Action research, for example, there is a problem related to nutrition or energy or whatever. You develop a hypothesis around it based on your understanding of the surrounding, of the context, or of the phenomena, or of all. Based on that hypothesis, you make a solution. After the solution is implemented, you examine whether it is working or not. You examine that based on a systematic data collection. You see that it is not working. Then you develop another hypothesis why it might not be working. You collect data about that. You may tweak the intervention. You may change the intervention. You collect the data again to see whether new change or tweaked change process has been more effective. You collect the data. You examine it objectively. That's the process action research works. So action research can be a fantastic approach for SE research. You may not be able to do the solutioning. You may not be the person, you may not be leading the organization which gives solution, but at least you can collaborate with the other social entrepreneurs and help them to document their wonderful work. So that will be called action research, where you are the partner, research partner, and that will be an excellent collaboration of the industry and academics. Yes, Uma Sharma ji has a question, please.
Yes, sir. I just wanted further clarification to my question I had posted in the chat, sir. You had just now put out the points for it. So, as a new research area, in a sense, new when we say the investigation of those cases in India is practically low, then do we start with the proposition and the construct and try and see how much of theory is built around the topic and then only go into descriptive study? That's what you are suggesting, sir?
No, what my suggestion is that before you can, of course, familiarize yourself with the literature, but going for the exploratory research is doesn't require you to hang on to a particular sets of theories. You can be informed, but need not be totally kind of dependent on those theories, and be open to critique those theories and concepts in light of the insights you get in the field.
Okay. Okay. So if it is particularly in areas like how the entrepreneurs find their funding option, so if I'm looking at a very new tool of funding like crowdfunding, so do I go about saying that it's too new, so I can base it on my assumptions or my pilot work or my explorative cases that I have?
So
Can I go ahead and do that, sir?
um, there has to be some pilot, and the pilot may not be the fully functional pilot. The pilot can be just for getting the feedback from the field.
Okay.
Pilot may not always be the fully functioning pilot. It can be just done to get the
Understood, sir.
feedback.
Maybe I have not identified all the dimensions or the framework of that research question. So that's what you mean to say, all, not all, everything is listed. Maybe I know it partly. Is that okay to then go ahead and follow the descriptive study, propose a hypothesis, and test it on my small, limited cases that I have?
So
Because you had just said that trying to generalize is also wrong.
yeah, miss, too much emphasis on the generalization is not helping anyone. And
Yes. Yeah,
and,
very true.
and we need to be in the typology of Professor Madhukar Shukla. You see the
Very
sound
correct. Yeah.
entrepreneurs will always be at the local level. How can you generalize a finding about something or some model which is based on the medical facility provided by one SC in the Sundarban area? I mean, that's a you can have some learning, but the model or theory cannot be developed. The model cannot be generalized.
Okay.
So what is the building block? What are the building blocks? Are the research questions, propositions, and then hypothesis. We need not to develop.
Yeah, that kind of a framework at least we could follow. Thank you for that, sir. Yeah, sir.
Yeah. So there need not to be too much emphasis on the hypothesis, and to start with, we have to have hypothesis. Better you not have hypothesis, but get familiar with the literature. But have a. I think the most important thing is having a most interesting research question.
Very correct. Yeah, yeah, sir. Yeah, sir.
Why am I doing? Who will be interested? Why someone will bother about this research finding? Who is missing out by not knowing this?
Okay.
What is known in the field? What is not known in the field? How I am going to contribute? Is this the am I able to explain something better, even locally, than the existing theories can explain? Can I predict something which is uh, uh, which was not possible before with my research? So these are the simple questions we need to ask in the beginning. Who bothers? What we are? So so interesting research question has these elements. It has it talks about a phenomena. You can understand the research question in context of it is not in the abstraction. It is not like
Correct.
mathematics. Some branches of mathematics for which you don't have to have and you cannot have the practical basis. An interesting research question will have some practical basis. Somewhere you can point out that question is real. Then we need to know who are the stakeholders, who are the people affected by the because of this question, who will be benefited if we answer this question, who will be interested to listening to the solution of this question. And then comes how it can predict future events or how it can explain that problem better. Then comes a question about the theory. Okay, so which theory is appropriate to connect it with? Uh, Many time it happens, not many time, actually all the time it happens. I start my research with this process, and I assume that okay, now I'm going to develop. We will be able to develop a sound or important theory. But theory is many time, most of the time, theory has been there to support our finding and to give the theoretical basis for our work. So it's okay, but the empirical finding is also interesting, and then there's a marginal contribution to the theory that also happens. You may not be able to develop the altogether novel theory, but even if you can make some contribution to the existing theory, that is also good enough. Yeah, someone raised the question. Someone raised the hand before, so you can ask the question.
No, sir, by mistakenly it had happened. Sorry, sir.
No problem. So let us talk about some of the approaches of research, and very quickly. Um, you can take one example. We can take a very common example for to understand this different approaches of research. So since we are left with 15 minutes, I can give example. Let us take the example of education or health, which is very general in nature. Anybody would like to give a real life question about which we need to do something? Any general societal challenge about which? So if we take example of the social entrepreneurship in the field of, you can say, healthcare. What kind of
Sir, excuse me, sir.
yes?
Can I say something, sir?
Okay, yeah.
Sir, as you have already told about you just asked about the social challenge that we will be facing, and just mentioned about the healthcare. So it clicked into my mind. So many of us faces this problem. Generally, also, be it of any age group, they do not consist the correct information of the usage or consumption of the generic medicines or something like that. Be it old age people, or be it the homemakers, or be it in children. So that is the obvious way. Means we go to the stores, okay, medical stores, they give us the medicines and all, but we do not consist those. And due to the lack of knowledge of that consumption level of the medicines, also many of the things happens. Be it having those diseases, coming contact into the diseases, or the unnatural deaths or something like that.
Okay,
So
great.
if we can
Thanks
tap
for
that
sharing it.
issue.
Okay, thanks for sharing this example. Now, this is your observation. Similarly, we can have many other observations about so many things in life, about education, about health, about safety, about so many things. Now, based on this observation, we need to convert some of these observation into the research question. What is the research question into it? And anyone can contribute.
Research question could be that ki, sir, ki, how are we are going to, cover the areas, or how are we going to make the people aware about the thing which I have already told you. Issues.
That is actually solution. That is actually
Oh,
you
okay,
are looking at
it's
the
question.
how to implement the solution.
Right. I got it, sir. Okay, so
What is the research question? Anyone else? Not necessarily Ms. Chaudhary.
maybe I'm unable to draft it properly. My question, I guess maybe I'm unable to do that.
No, but your observation is correct. People not using generic medicines judiciously. There is a scope for people to use the generic medicine judiciously. And what is the meaning of that? What is the meaning of judicious?
Not having proper knowledge about the medicine
Yeah. So
consumption.
what do you mean by proper knowledge?
Again, sir, to be very specific, I'm not getting those words actually.
Yeah.
Sir,
Yes.
The creating
So
awareness.
Yeah. So Meena ji has raised hand. Yes, Meena, please go ahead. Okay, I think this is also by chance. So, anyone else?
Sir, the research question could be to explore the reasons behind people not choosing generic medicines or not going for generic medicines.
So this is to explore. Can we further refine the question?
Explore the behavioral reasons.
This is a topic. Okay. Sir, this is a topic. Now, what is the research question? What is bothering? What is not known?
People are not aware about
that is
the availability of generic
that is your conclusion.
Yeah.
Sir, on doctors, recommended recommendations also, on having that particular prescriptions also, why aren't they consuming it properly, or why aren't they having the proper knowledge of generic medicines?
Who is not having the proper knowledge? The patients?
No, I mean the public, means be it in any belonging to any age group,
that's okay, but they don't have the knowledge. What do you mean by what we should know, what they should know which they do not know?
Suppose, sir, as I will take my example. Okay, I can give my example. I really do not know anything about the medicine consumptions except the crocin pain relief, which I usually do consume a lot of time. Okay, and the nimsulin kind of a medicine which I'm having for the headaches and all. So only two medicines knowledge I am having. Other than that, if I'm suffering with some other diseases or something like that, or some normal pains also, I can't think over about any other medicines except the painkillers, normal painkillers, or those kind of things. So that is what bothering me, and that is what the question is coming into my mind. If we can provide something, some support to them, or some demonstrative kind of applications to them or services to them.
Again. Now you are again going back to the solution. I'm saying identify the research question. People are not aware of the generic medicine. That is why people are not aware of now about the non-aware. The phenomena is awareness about the generic medicine.
Yes.
From there, you can develop many research questions. Why people are not aware of this generic medicines? Why doctors are not prescribing generic medicine? What people will do by knowing about the generic medicine. When you say if they are not knowledgeable, or what do you mean by that? What knowledge they should have about the
Yeah.
generic medicine?
Yes.
Why they should have? How that knowledge can be given? All these are the research questions.
Research questions. Okay. Okay.
So
Fine.
we need to convert any problem or observation into the research question. That's the first thing.
Okay. Okay, sir. Got it now. Got it. Got it.
And to answer the research question, we can have multiple approaches. First approach is analytical view. In the analytical view, we assume that all knowledge is outside of us, and by collecting the data, collecting the objective data, we can answer any research question, or based on the, so first is the research question. Once the research question is identified, we look at the literature. Is that question already solved, or any part of any aspect of the research question which is not addressed in the literature? So based on that, we may develop a hypothesis, or without developing hypothesis, we can enter the field with that research question. When we work with some hypothesis, it is called analytical view, and based on analytical view, the analytical view is based on the assumption that reality is objective, it is socially, it is kind of measurable. You can know about it with the quantitative methods, and analyze it, and reach to conclusion by applying the quantitative method, because anyway it is objective. That is the first analytical approach. So you may do a survey about, you may develop a hypothesis that people with the certain type of personality are they have more awareness about the medicine than others, or people in certain locality have more awareness about the other, and people having certain type of education have more, something like that. You can develop a hypothesis and test that if it is useful. Second approach is systems approach, which do not look at the phenomena as a awareness, phenomena as something which is association of the two variables. It looks at the overall constellation of the variables. So it may look at the education, societal, sociographics, the geography, the age group, and based on so many variables, a system dynamic modeling can be done. And that system dynamic modeling gives an excellent representation of otherwise a complex social reality. It is based on the assumption that reality do not play out independently. The variable do not play out independently in the field. Basically, in life, everything is connected to everything else. So you need to identify the sets of variables and identify what are the nodes, what are the critical factors which are affecting any system. All systems are made up of a smaller system, part of the bigger system. So to understand any phenomena, you have to draw a boundary, and within that boundary, you understand and you examine that system. You examine the phenomena as a system. Third approach is the actors approach, which says that we cannot understand system as an outsider, because reality is not outside, reality is inside. How I experience world is not an objective thing, it is social construction, it is based on my assumption, my worldview. So you must have heard Professor Archana Singh today morning. She said that we ask participant to go to the field society without giving any specific input, and she used the word a couple of times, go and understand their worldview. So if you go and understand the worldview, you may come to know that they may not know about the generics, but they are well aware of, and they are more comfortable knowing the daily Ayurvedic daily herbs which are being talked about in the Ayurveda, but not in the allopathy. So it might be their worldview. They might be knowing something which you don't know. So before reaching to any conclusion, talk to people, what they have to say, how they explain their situation. That's an actor's approach. So in the analytical approach, we use the methods which are more quantitative in nature, regression analysis, correlation, etc. In systems view, we use more simulation, system dynamic modeling, factor analysis, uh, case studies in the systems view. In the actors approach, the methods are more based on interviewing, ethnography, ethnomethodology, uh, uh, grounded research. These are the approaches being used in the actors approach. My suggestion is, please identify the interesting research question and at least 25 interesting research question. Pick up 4 or 5, the most interesting ones, and then try to examine all those questions from all these 3 approaches. So if I am understanding if I am looking at the leadership in the social entrepreneurship, I can do a questionnaire based survey, which is based on identifying certain variables. I can look at the social, social reality, and I can look at the situations where this whole thing is connected to the different aspects of society and how these things are connected to each other. And we can make a system dynamic model. Or leadership in the social entrepreneurship can also be understood by talking to the leaders and their followers, and then understanding what is the meaning of leadership, how leadership plays out in the social sector, and is it different in the from the commercial sector. So that's where we need to conclude. Mr. Abdul, I think, has a question. He has raised the hand, so I am assuming he has a question. Please go ahead, Abdul. Okay, so I think this is also by chance. So here we come to the conclusion. How to identify the new, how to do interesting research, look at that interesting research question, spend time on the research question, spend time on identifying the research question. The problem is we spend 4 years in the data collection and writing thesis, and we do not spend even 4 days in identifying the interesting research questions. If we identify the interesting research questions, apply all these 3 approaches. At least hypothetically, at least in your mind, you can apply all these 3 approaches and see how different type of designs can emerge. You will be short of time. You will have so many interesting ideas, and you may have so many interesting research ideas, research designs by doing this exercise, which will be sufficient to keep you busy for many years. Not only keep you busy, but will keep your students also busy for many years. Wish you very best, and thanks very much for giving opportunity and listening to me on this forum.
Thank you very much, sir. It was really a very good session, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Really very, very informative one.
Thank you, sir, for such an insightful session. Now, Dr. Nisha, are you there? Dr. Nisha?
I think she is on the phone call.
Okay, fine. So, participants, now this is a break, I guess, of 10 minutes. And our next session is going to be on 3:45. It's 3:30, 3:45. So we'll be back within 15 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, sir.